Well, I'll say good afternoon in Las Vegas, good morning or good evening, depending on where you're watching the broadcast of the event. I am Jeff Augustine. I'm the managing director for Allsbridge. Allsbridge is one of the fastest growing third-party advisors in the technology marketplace. Our mission is to help customers that are going through transformation and the selection of technology products and services make the best decision. So we're advisors in that space. And delighted to be at CA World today. Manish, you want to give a little background on yourself?
Absolutely, Jeff. Thank you very much. And thank you, CA, for having Jeff and me here on this beautiful stage on this beautiful day in Las Vegas at CA World 2015. Always excited to be here at the CA World. Well, so my name is Manish Vyas, and I am the president and business head for the telecom business that we do worldwide at Tech Mahindra. And over the years, for the last 2.5 decades, our strategic mantra has been very simple at one level, which has been to observe and listen to the business and business transformation trends that are taking shape in the industry, and react and respond and build and shape solutions to try and address those transformational needs. Today's topic is essentially addressing arguably one of the most tectonic shifts happening in the industry. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Jeff, for doing this together with us.
No worries. So listen, Digical is the topic that we're talking about today, really the convergence of digital. And I think if we looked at the marketplace, we've seen it's been called SMAC, where we're talking about the SMAC set of components and services. Now, as they converge with the physical world, Digical is the tag name, if you will, that's been coined. And so Manish, I mean, you know, there's a lot of talk around this. How do you define this? What's the big deal about Digical?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you said it. You probably defined it at one level, which is it is the confluence, it is the complementary nature of digital new technology and the physical assets. It is about our firm belief is that large enterprises, companies that were not born digital, companies that would want to remain and grow in this new thriving digital economy will have to transform. Absolutely no doubt about it. But not transform at the cost of dumping, deserting, ditching, giving up on their core assets, on their core fundamentals. If I were to give an analogy, the physical and the core business of large enterprises is like the spinal cord of a human body. And the digital is the ever-evolving, not just the cosmetic, but what is visible, what makes the interaction possible and beautiful and nicer, right? So I think it's a combination of adopting at a very, very rapid pace, at a very large scale, the digital technologies and transformation initiatives, at the same time leveraging the core strength that the large enterprises have, that in some cases the digital companies born digital do not, because they need to go back and build those capabilities over a period of time. So in my view and in our view, Digital is all about creating the fine balance strategically, technologically, and operationally of the digital and the physical capabilities of an enterprise.
Well, I think if you take it even further to build on, you know, to me it's helpful to get some examples, right? An example I've come back to is, you know, I look at companies in the agribusiness space, and my family, you know, our industry was farming, right? And you looked at it in the era of when my grandfather was a farmer. Digital. You couldn't, I don't think you could even spell it. Well, what was that, right? Today, in fact, as I talk to people that are in that business, I find that there are technologies at play where a farmer will buy a planter. He'll test the planter out, and the planter knows it's already planted a certain area of the field. It won't replant that area when he goes to live production because it knows it already has planted it. So the intelligence built into the Internet of Everything is there. Do you have any other examples that help hammer home the digital
absolutely.
aspect?
I mean, I think while I'm glad you mentioned precision agriculture. I mean, it's an area that Mahindra, our group company, is so heavily involved in because the farm sector is one of the largest businesses. But you take that story forward and you take to a business that I am very closely aligned with, which is telecoms. You take service providers that are now 100-year-old, 120-year-old. A lot of people have made these claims about the industry is going to get diminished, is going to get heavily impacted by the influx of digital technology. But the smarter things that several of the telecom service providers have done is they have picked the right digital technologies in the right areas. Right? For example, they have said, why should a mobile phone and a mobile plan and a value-added services on top of it be sold via a very conventional channel, retail or call centers or what have you? Why can't it be absorbed, consumed in a very seamless digital self-consumption model? And that's an area where a lot of people have invested heavily in it. I guess that's a very good example of how people have adopted and yet retained the strength from a physical standpoint.
Well, so it's almost overwhelming for people when they think about how do they manage in that kind of an environment. And in an enterprise that we're all trying to advance and grow and transform, how do enterprises set better goals for themselves so that they can be effective in the digital marketplace?
Goals, I mean, absolutely, Jeff. If you look at how historically the industries, any industry, I'm not referring just to the telecom industry, healthcare, large banks, manufacturing, retail, whoever, transformation per se always meant starting from looking at a few business problems, but heavily focused on technology and looking at a lot of times with due respect to what all of us have achieved over the years. When we look back, transformation was also another fancy word for incremental improvement. What we are witnessing now, though, is transformation which is more disruption than improvement. It is about aiming audacious. It is about aiming big. It is about aiming or setting goals which are bigger than imaginations, or wilder imaginations, if I'm allowed. So the first stepping stone of setting better goals is to first set not wise goals, but crazy goals. Is to say that by leveraging technology, leveraging digital, we are going to be looking and solving problems that we today don't even think of. So easier said than done. Absolutely complex and a very ambiguous statement that I just made and brought smiles to some of you, right? But that's where it is. I mean, I'm just stating something which I hear from people who have been partially successful and from people who have been highly unsuccessful. There aren't too many people who have been wildly successful in this space at this point in time. Now, that I think is the first step. The second, the goals will not happen in isolation or in spite of your people. Goals, whatever goals you set, will happen only because you will invite people who are technically far superiorly skilled, or you are bringing the technical skills of your people to start thinking, how will we be able to solve this problem? So it's not just about what goals you set, but on whose basis do you set these goals. Otherwise, you will definitely fall flat on your nose. The third thing I would say is to set the goals is do not think conventional. Do not think in transformation. Typically, every time we start a program to say, okay, let's change, we usually more often than not think that are we going to be disrupting or changing or impacting, or are we taking certain risks? Think about it, no doubt, but the very last. We think about what technology do we want to implement. Think about it, but little later. The first thing we got to think is, what will this do to our brand? What will this do to our business strategy? What impact will this have in our positioning in the marketplace? I mean, if I were to give an example from a goal setting standpoint, if Airbnb were to think like how a conventional hospitality industry company was thinking, Airbnb would not have happened. Airbnb thought of a problem statement very differently, saying, I want to give a $120 per night stay at Times Square for a person who wants to do a 8 o'clock meeting on 42nd Street and 8th Avenue. Somebody who's just flown into JFK at 8 o'clock in the previous night. Conventional approach would be, all right, I would give you a room near Newark Airport or somewhere in New Jersey, and then you take a train ride or a taxi ride to go there. Or pay $500 to stay at Times Square. They looked at this problem very disruptively. Much later would they have thought about, okay, what platform, what partners, what crowdsourcing. These things came much later. So from a goal setting standpoint, a very long answer to your simple question, but my point is, it's not about the goals, it's also about what problems are we solving. I guess one will have to look at that.
Yeah, well, I think we are a technologist. I've been in the industry for 31 years, and I've seen many different flavors. And we, as technologists, tend to generalize, right? We love to look at it from the standpoint, well, this digital is this magic pixie dust that just you add it and it all of a sudden changes things over. And I'm simply struck with a couple of industries that I look at. If you look at healthcare, decades ago, it was a very, very high touch, very physical touch between the patient and the medical provider. Now it's an x-ray can be read around the world and a diagnosis produced, and you may not even have to be in a physical location. I'm also looking in the media world today, and I'm struck, however, that if I were to, in my old days, take my date to a movie, I'm not so sure that movie would be as effective if I'm watching it on an iPad at my kitchen table. There may not be the same effect. But are there barriers, Manish, to Digical, and what do people have to overcome as they really think about how they advance in the digital marketplace?
Yeah, I think barriers, if you were to look at the glass half empty, enablers, if you were to look at it the reverse way. I think I alluded to one earlier, which is the people aspect. Every large enterprise is constantly, you wake any CEO middle of the night and say, okay, what is your greatest problem, Mr. CEO, today? More often than not, the answer is going to be, I need those 20 people who will help me transform, right? Whether they come from outside or come from within, I need those 20 people. So that, I think, is the one major barrier. The second, and probably even a greater issue, is it's about the mindset. Where does it stand from? We will have to flip the paradigm, if I may, the pyramid of thinking. We will have to work, we'll have to bring the business strategy, the brand, the positioning as the objective, right at the bottom of the pyramid, not on the top. And then start bottoms up, right? Because that is the most important thing. We are, and that, I think, is the essence of the digital or the digital transformation aspect. Where I am emphasizing on is that leveraging and taking advantage of your physical attributes is absolutely a must. Do not desert it, do not ditch it. And the propensity to say whatever is old and legacy is not good, I think is a great barrier today to move forward, right? The third one, and if I want to for a moment go back to the mindset issue really, I recently came across this amazing, what on the surface of it sounds like an audacious statement. The chairman of SoftBank recently, and I have heard at this conference several examples being made by several people, all of us probably have read about it, that the average life of a company is now reducing by the year, right? From 67 years now to 15 years or so and so forth. But I heard a completely radical thing recently from SoftBank. They said, we are investing so that this company will grow for 300 years. So they are looking to bring digital, singularity, and those kind of concepts to say that we are going to be relevant for the next 300 years, whether people stay or no, right? I guess that is the mindset issue that I'm talking about. I mean, we are talking very, very different, very seismic type of changes. And I guess that's one of the several things in the list of things which potentially could be the barriers in that approach and process.
And by the way, for the audience, in a few moments, we'll certainly open it up for some questions from you about Digical and the topic. But please be thinking about those as we go through the dialogue today. Manish, I'm struck with what's got to change. That's the big question that's in mind. It's in my mind. We've talked a lot about what Digital is, but what really needs to change? How do people need to be thinking about this?
You know, I have often said this in recent times, as we have looked at our own strategy and our growth prospects, as we have worked with several of our customers in a consulting role, we have said that the best way to define what needs to change, the best way to define a strategic roadmap of what our clients should be focusing on, what we should be doing hence, is summed up in a sentence, which is we will have to become as agile, as nimble, as innovative as a startup, and yet retain the maturity and the strengths of a behemoth. Now that confluence, that complexity and the ability to simplify that, I think is the change, is the real change. And wherever we are able to try and peel that onion successfully and find out what each layer means from an execution standpoint. If I were to put my gamble my 2 cents, I would put on people who are able to do this successfully. It won't happen, like you said very correctly, it won't happen overnight. It's not a pixie dust thing. It's not magic. This will happen painstakingly. So just to go, since we are at CA and the concept is application, let's talk about the nitty-gritties of development. The digital companies, we have heard, do millions of releases every year. Millions. And some of the larger companies, historical legacy companies, who have been used to doing 1 release a year, maybe now are doing 30 releases a year. But where is the comparison? 30, 35, 40, 50, 100 releases a year to millions, 50 million releases a year is what I hear about certain companies that all of us know about. Now, will we go leapfrog from 100 to 50 million? No way. The 100 will have to change though, but not to 200. Somebody will have to start thinking about how do we do 1,000 releases this year, right? Now, it's at 2 levels below at a technology level, but the thinking will have to start happening. And then people will have to say, okay, so what needs to change, right? Our approval processes will have to change. I can't wait for 2 months to say, okay, what are we delivering now in this release? So I guess it's a combination of leadership, mindset change, process change, people change, technical core abilities, and then of course, but right on top of it, like I said, is what problem are we solving? If we are not thinking a business and a business strategy problem, this is going to be a non-starter.
I think the process change, I would jump on top of that one, because traditionally, and we are at CA World, we are in the applications arena right now, we're talking about that. Traditionally you've looked at a very standard waterfall type approach to development and implementation. Frankly, I don't think that could be any further from the truth this day and age. I think it's more of a tsunami effect of development and the ability to implement applications, and the 1,000 releases in a period of time, I couldn't agree with you more. Fundamentally, things are changing, and they're able to move so much faster. I do want to just maybe segue a bit. The implications for technology product and service providers, given the marketplace, what do you see there?
That's a tough one. I mean, that's where we are. It's like, coming straight to our core here. While so far, in the first 20 odd minutes, discussions that we have had is all about where it should be focused on, which is on all of you, on the enterprises, on our customers, on what you got to do. For us to be able to be the partner, for us, CA, to continue to be the partner of choice in this transformation journey, no marks for guessing. We got to change significantly. We will have to decompose the problems that we solve. We will have to elevate the conversation, which we have been really focused on, to a business. Everything that I said, whatever I preached so far, is what we will have to practice, right? We will have to not start from a technology standpoint saying, let's solve a 1,000 release problem. But 1,000 release problem for what? The 1,000 release problem for getting the customers things that they need faster than ever before. If that's the objective, if we have that as an objective and we take that as a story, we always, invariably, without fail, get a very attentive audience from our client organizations, always, without exceptions. Then when we also show that we don't need to spend $100 million to be able to do this. It's not a big, large, monolithic 18-month transformation program. We will achieve our successes in a decomposed microservices fashion. We will know every single day of this journey, what are we achieving tomorrow, right? Here are the accountabilities that are there. There is, of course, a business model change that happens because we are now going to be able to, for example, and you may want to allude to what you were telling me earlier about this, the whole analogy about a grid versus what happens in the compute model. We will have to take this whole business to that level. And that is possible. It's happening in the industry. I'm not saying anything which any one of you have not heard in the past.
I think it's absolutely right. The art of differentiation in the marketplace, I think, is key from not just a product or technology product or services company, but our end clients in general. And the analogy that Manish was referencing is we take the power grid as a given. We turn the switch on and it works. Every single time we turn it on, it works, right? Invariably. Where is that utility model moving to? In many cases, it's moving up the IT stack, right? To a point where we almost look at infrastructure as a given, a utility. Now, so it's table stakes. And to the degree of automation and new technologies that we're seeing in the delivery of IT services, it becomes simply table stakes. It's the utility model. Flip the switch, the infrastructure's there. So now, how do we differentiate and how do we take advantage of what's really available in the technology marketplace to advance our enterprise cause? And this is the dialogue that Manish and I were having earlier. Let's pause for a moment. Perhaps there are questions or any feedback from the audience on any questions that you might have had as we've had our dialogue here?
Sure.
Please.
Kind of curious, listening to your conversation. You mentioned that the average company life is reducing. And
Can you come closer and speak a little louder?
I'm sorry. You mentioned a moment ago that the average company life is reducing, and of course we all know that. My question is actually in two parts. First of all, would the correct digital remediation improve that company life? And second, what aspects of digitalization would a company need to consider to compute an ROI?
Awesome question, David, right? Awesome question. I think I'll give you, so the answer, so let me repeat your question if everybody got it. That will the right interpretation, and I would add, if you allow, implementation of the digital strategy, is it likely to improve the average life of an enterprise? No marks for guessing, answer is a big yes, in my view. The reasons are, the life of companies, as I read, as a student of the industry, whatever I have understood, one reason, amongst others, that companies have not survived, some companies have not survived like others have, the longer life, is because they have not successfully transformed, and let me color that, transformed to appeal to their new set of customers who were not born when these companies were born, who were not growing when these companies were at its peak. So they don't know, they don't care who these companies were, right? These are people who are going to be 20, 25-year-old in a couple of years' time, right? The Gen Z. The companies have not survived or will not survive because they have not transformed themselves to adopt and appeal to these people. Now, the right interpretation and implementation of the digital strategy is more likely to make them more relevant to these audiences and these customers, is going to provide a medium, a platform which the new generation understands, which is the digital. They only understand the screens. They only understand instant. They only understand contextual. They only understand real time. They only understand, you got to know what I need, I'm not going to tell you, the predictive aspect. They understand that. What they don't understand is, the car doesn't get manufactured on a phone. It's only the picture of the car that gets manufactured here. The car does get manufactured in a solid factory. So the question is, how do you improve the front end to these Gen Zs, Generation Z people, at the same time modernize the physical infrastructure of your car manufacturing? An example, Mahindras also are into car manufacturing. We just, about 3 years ago, we launched one of our state-of-the-art plant on the outskirts of Mumbai in India. That plant versus another plant have some similarities and some differences. Similarities are for a 35,000 vehicles that get manufactured in a year. I'm giving numbers which are 2 years old, are identical to the number of vehicles that get manufactured in another plant of the same company, of the same model, about 200 kilometers from that place. Similarity. Number of workers working in this plant is about 2,800. Number of workers working in that plant, about 2,800 to 900. Another similarity. Difference is the type of people who work in this plant, and the technology used in this plant is way different than the technology used there. There is heavy automation, heavy software, heavy robotics, right? Massive sophistication. Because this plant is now ready to make cars in time to come that will be connected, that will be far more intelligent, that will be far more easily serviceable, if I may, and that kind of stuff. So I think for this group company of ours to have invested in the digital or Digitcal transformation to ensure that they are able to make cars which are going to be relevant for the future, I think is one good example. Again, this is not the end of everything. There is the branding, there is the positioning, there is the pricing, there is the competition, there is the economy at a larger scale. All that comes into play. But things which are in the control of this company are these things. And I, for one, as a stakeholder in this firm, feel better that we have taken the right step in the right direction. And these are not incremental steps. These are absolutely big, massive transformational steps.
I may offer another example, David, in terms of, I'll call it more fundamental business, right? It's a matter of sometimes timing and strategy. And I think if you took a look at the retail marketplace as only an example, and many years ago, some 30 years ago, we saw significant commerce conducted in the catalog space, mail order, heavy calls, evolving into heavy call center type usage. And at that point in time, some of the big retailers that were in that space, if you looked at them, they embraced an e-commerce type strategy, no matter how primitive it might have been back then. And I think if you looked at it, what they did, they tried to embrace the digital side of Digical, right, and abandoned in some cases the physical side of their business. That timing might have been a flaw. And I think if it'd take you one quick internet search, and you'll find out about the case study that is out there in terms of how strategies and timing were used and how that might have shown some missteps perhaps if you forego and simply push all of your chips, we're in Las Vegas, right? Push all of your chips onto the digital spot, if you will, and abandon the physical side of it. There has to be a concerted effort to bring them together, especially when that fundamental business has so much to do with an end consumer and not leaving them in the dust, so to speak. Others in the retail space, others have maintained their investment in some of the high touch, the brick and mortar sides of their business while adopting a digital strategy that's taken them a little longer to get there. But I think they're now seeing greater rewards from that approach than someone that made perhaps a very bold move back 30 years ago, but maybe it didn't quite pay off for them. So I might offer that as well in terms of a strategy of how companies can either last longer or not. Other audience questions? I'd rather answer audience questions than anything else, Manish.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm all right.
Here's another one coming.
How does the future workforce impacted by all this?
Future workforce?
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on, and I see some type of, is there job elimination or what's going to exist in the future because of this?
You want to take a
Yeah,
crack?
I'll take a crack at it. And I like to tell stories, right? So the story that comes to my mind as a result of this one, I'll make the statement. First of all, I think the digital literacy of our population in general is on the rise, for sure. There's no question, right? 20 years ago, was anybody using an anything or an Android anything? Highly doubtful. And I'm reminded of it. I've got a young granddaughter. And the other day, she came up to me, and she had one sock on and one sock off. And I said, "Oh, honey, where's your sock?" She said, "Well, Papa, I've lost it. Could you Google it for me?" Right? And the point is that as a 4-year-old, right, and she's already to a point where she's thinking in terms of how to search for something with something called Google. What did anybody know about Google when we were all of that age? So I believe that there won't be the same kind of job profile in 20, 30, 40 years from now for the workforce. It'll be very different. I think it'll be much more aligned to what we see today as the kinds of products and services that are being delivered in the marketplace. And yet, I'm not so sure we're aware of all of the new businesses that will be born as a result of the digital transformation. And that in and of itself, I think, will open up job opportunities. But I think they're going to be fundamentally different. I think the workforce is going to change. I think the consumer force is going to change. And that's going to drive some much different behaviors. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, no, if I
anything
can just add one thing to that, I think, Jeff, one, I completely agree. Two, I totally believe that it's only an opportunity and a massive opportunity than a decline of it. So that's my position. One part of me is maybe optimistic, but let's also look at the history, right? The best way sometimes to see what is happening in the future is to learn our history, they say. Now, digital per se is not new. Like very recently, a very eminent customer executive of ours reminded me, he's saying, at times I feel insulted, he said, that people talk about digital. What have I been doing all my career? I have been a CIO all my life. I have been doing, it's all about bits and bytes, it's about digital. But yes, he was not making a very loose, naive statement. He had a context. He said, I understand at the same time that this digital we are talking about is not technology. This is about changing the workforce, is about changing how the consumers are going to be consuming the service and the product. It is about business more than just pure technology. That's digital and the relevance of digital in this case. But going back to the point of history, the fact is automation, robotics, Jeff tells me that the first project he did in artificial intelligence was 32 years ago when he was a baby. So, I mean, if we've been talking about these things then, economies worldwide have grown. Jobs have only grown. Opportunities have only grown. Companies have only grown. Long ago, when I was a baby, I mean, I thought $1 million was a big revenue for a company, right? I mean, today we talk about the cash reserves in companies which are not too far from here. I mean, that can buy multiple countries at the same time. So I think things have changed, and I want to come to something that I missed from my notes. Probably is a good time to answer that. Jeff asked about objectives and goals. One thing that I think you got to think about is, while setting goals, smart goals, do not deal in percentages, right? I call it a middle class way of thinking. Think in multiples, many multiples, in terms of change, in terms of disruption that you would cause in a positive fashion. And that also, I think, is the underlying reason I believe when you make these kind of changes, you will create far more opportunities for the next generation, which is where the next workforce is. The 4-year-old granddaughter of Jeff, who probably will create something even better than Google. God bless her.
Other questions that are out there while we see one coming up here. I was on a panel in New York a few months ago, and the topic of robotics came up, and the thought process was, well, what about robots' rights? I'll just let that simmer for a while. My response was very unique, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Please.
Hi. My question is, when we go to the digital world, the companies nowadays like Facebook or any of the social media or even the emails company, if you ask what is the intrinsic value of a company, today it's all virtual money. When the stock market is there, what is that these companies are having? They say, I have the customer base. When we go into that direction, going forward, how the companies in the digital form will be evaluated? How do you know what is the value of this company? Because nowadays there is no capital investment is required. A person coming out of after graduation, he'll start from a company from a garage. So I want to know how you are going to rate a company in terms of what it's worth for.
I think it's a great question, but not that I don't want to answer your question, but I want to link your question with the question that I think it was David who asked about the lifespan and the impact of digital on lifespan. Maybe the answer to both is same, and that is the power is in the data. The power is in what you do with the data. The power is in what you will use that data to take what decisions. And when I say you, I don't mean those companies. I mean their users, the customers of these companies. So how effectively will you leverage your digital footprint to convert as a value intelligent data and intelligent value for your customers, enterprise or consumers, what have you, in being able to take decisions. And that also, hence I believe, given that you will be able to keep and build these very large, complex algorithms using the data that you are accumulating over a period of time, that you will also be able to enhance, prolong the ability to serve your customers, not limited by who are the people and who are the technical guys working on those things. So in my view, it is that reach, but the reach is not in terms of number of customers. It is data. It is essentially number of customers and what they are producing, and it is about providing that platform for collaboration, and then an ability to try and monetize that over a period of time. I guess that's the key differentiator in that space.
I'd simply add to it, I'm not an economist, I'm a technologist, so I don't know how eventually companies will, I think it's up to every company to find a way to commercialize their product or service. But I'll go back to the analogy that I used earlier about the power grid. We take things for granted at a utility level, and power being the first and foremost in the technology marketplace. But now, let's just say infrastructure is the next wave. Perhaps those companies that operate on a social level could eventually be perhaps another layer to this utility model that might exist out there. Now, they'll have to figure out how to make money at it. That's the only way, I guess, you do exist. But I'm a believer that utility model will continue to evolve, and we'll take it for granted that these services are available to the marketplace, and we'll build upon that. So that will have a value of a company in and of itself and allow it to have some longevity. But I believe that we're going to keep moving up that stack, if you will. Other questions? I know we got a few minutes left before we close.
Got to move the mic down. So I was sitting at lunch today with some customers here at CA World from Fidelity. And they were talking about how the Gen Z and millennials come into their company expecting everything to be automated and expecting difficult processes to be fixed by now. When do you envision the tipping point where you've had this revolution, you've gone in and digitalized processes and made them seamless and made them automated? When do you envision that happening, and what steps do companies need to take now to build for that future state?
I think it's a great question, by the way, and I think it is not about anything in the future. I think the answer to that question is in the past. It has happened. In my view, that tipping point has happened. In my view, the train has left the station. It is now about who are the people who are going to be running very fast and catching up with this train to still get on this train. The question is it still possible? Is this train running at 120 miles an hour and you are not? My take is, even if it is right now running at 120 miles an hour, there are tools available to still go catch it. Right? There are still the pixie dust, the magic moments possible to still go catch this train, because there are several people who are right now stranded in this journey of trying to catch that train. And the reason I say that, I want to substantiate, is there are companies who are already successfully, who have migrated to this fully automated model. If they have not, because they are still saddled, or like somebody recently told me, the antibodies of the past are still pulling them down, right? But companies who have been able to shirk these antibodies away and say, don't touch me, right? I will be able to make myself immune to those antibodies. I think they have managed to make that progress. The answer to that sometimes would be to identify the right balance, to your second part of the question, and to what I said earlier about flipping the pyramid, looking at what you want to be, then look at the technology, then the operations, and then the risks, not the reverse, right? That's one way of looking at it. The second, and several companies have done it, that's where you hear new ventures being created by large enterprises all the time, because they're saying, let me create something completely new. Again, a good strategy, a lot of people have taken it, but just imagine the power, which is, I think, what Digical is all about, is if you're able to create a new entity, real or virtual, doesn't matter, but leverage the spinal cord of your past, your 100-year, 50-year, 40 years of history, your physical assets, your core. I mean, that's like supremely powerful, because truly digital-born companies, guess where are they spending most of their time right now? Who was the company that created the last retail store? It was one of the digital companies. Who created the greatest warehouse recently? The true epitome of a physical infrastructure. A very large digital company. So they are also coming back. You can't survive without physical. Just cannot. What you got to do is to digitize even that physical. I think that's the poetry that somebody has to write, I guess.
I think there's a real threat for the legacy firms that are out there, right? Because we used Airbnb as an example earlier. You could look at Uber. Some of these other, out of the blue firms that came up with an idea were able to implement it and take it to mind-blowing market cap values. And for them to morph back into the physical side of it might be easier than some of the legacy companies that have to transform a huge enterprise, a huge structural cost and processes in place. So I think there's a real threat and a real opportunity for the entrepreneurs that are out there. So, but it's an exciting, no matter how scary it might be, it couldn't be any more exciting in terms of the digital and the technology marketplace. Hey, look, I know we're coming up on time. I wanted to thank everybody for the questions you offered. I've enjoyed being part of it. Manish, would you like to close with any comments?
Yeah, I think, Jeff, first of all, thank you very much for doing this. I've thoroughly enjoyed. Thank you all for listening. I want to attempt to summarize, taking a cue from that last question, honestly. Because something just struck in my head about a very good example of the tipping point or people who have been able to do it. Let me ask a question. If I say the latest, tell me a name of a car company that has adopted the sustainability, the electric technology very well and has made a mark for itself. Give me a name, anybody. Tesla, right? But there are several other companies who have equally good products in the electric car category, right? But what we remember is Tesla. There goes the brand, the strategy, changing the business paradigm, attacking something which is at the core of what the customers want. Customers want a big screen. Customers want a stylish looking car. They don't want to compromise on the style quotient. I still want to have the most glamorous looking vehicle parked in my garage. So that's one aspect, right? I said earlier that Mahindras are an automobile major in India and that part of the world and increasingly exporting. But we are doing something very interesting, and allow me to do a precursor of something that will happen in a month from now at CES here in Las Vegas in January, or 2 months from now. We decided to solve the sustainability problem. We decided to solve a very different problem though. We said that 80% of the world population is going to live by 2025, and this is an MIT data, this is data from several other sources, that by 2025, 80% of the workforce worldwide will work in the urban centers. People will not travel more than 35 miles or more as a radius every day to work. The speed at which they will go to work, commute, will be typically 30 to 35 miles an hour, because in the urban center there will be a limit to which you can build the physical road infrastructure. So you will have to, the traffic will come into play. It's already in play. I mean, name a big city and the first problem you hear about is traffic, right? Then we also said that the people who will be working are going to be the young and the generation Z, as we said, the Gen Z. So we came up, we innovated a product, designed in LA, manufactured in Detroit. It's a two-wheeler product. It's a scooter. And believe it or not, the name of the product is very interesting. It is Gen Z, spelt as G-E-N-Z-E. Now, what are we looking to solve there? I mean, it's a great example of what is happening here, and I hope it is successful. I think the company is putting in a lot of effort in it. It will be positioned towards urban and campuses, people who need to travel within 20 miles, 30 miles at 35 miles an hour. It will go towards a shared economy model in terms of you may not even need to buy the vehicle. You can just go swipe a card, use it, drop it somewhere, and somebody else will use it. Highly connected. It will have a nice screen, telematics oriented. Again, I guess, and it doesn't have Mahindra as a name. It has somewhere Mahindra. The brand is called Gen Z. It's a different identity, but it leverages our ability to design vehicles. We are not ditching that part. It leverages our ability to make automobiles. So I guess that's the future, and I hope everybody enjoyed this session. We did, presenting this. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Manish.